looking at space in a fairly micro kind of scale. And we are going to focus or kind of rather look critically at types, and types not as something, type is generally used in architecture as a deterministic strategy to organize life. But the three theses here are in some sense, talking to the theme of the overall kind of symposium. What is space besides type? And we are looking at what are the different or new ways or alternative ways of entering type, which complicate the reading of type. And that's why the idea of the limitation, the limits of type, and then what can it afford, how much life can it afford. And so to elaborate and discuss this whole idea, we have three theses in this panel. The first project is by Prachi Shah, and she talks of the productive lives of elderly women. The project actually started from the study of typological configuration and how it contains the elderly, but went on much beyond to look at how elderly women organize themselves and the space and people around themselves to actually make an entrepreneurial life possible in space. The second thesis by Avantika Padalkar talks about hybrid spaces, apartment typologies, where she's looking at how apartment typologies are not just places of living, but also contain a lot of aspirations and ambitions of entrepreneurial activities and work, along with leisure and other ways of occupying. And the third thesis by Akansha Satpute approaches apartments through the lens of climate. And she brings in the rubric of the development control regulations as they have formalized the type, but also the way in which they have impacted the flexibility of how they restrain the flexibility of reorganizing types to contain life, but um, the way in which it also restricts the adaptation to climate in those scenarios. So we will now invite Prachi to deliver her presentation, and then go ahead. Prachi.
Um, so today I'll be talking about my research on the productive lives of elderly women. This study examines how elderly women in Mumbai adapt their homes to run small businesses. It explores how their social networks and family dynamics support their entrepreneurial endeavors, challenging traditional notions of aging and productivity. Since childhood, I've been living in a joint family with my grandparents. My grandmother has been running a business of spices and pickles for the past 35 years. The business runs seasonally from February to April. The 3 BHK transforms into a dynamic space during these days. The living room becomes a place for customers to come and collect their orders, and the kitchen becomes a hub of activities. As a child, I saw it as mere changes. But growing up, I realized these adjustments were more than just a few spatial changes within the home. They reshape family dynamics and routines, requiring everyone to adapt to the new spaces and its demands. These observations sparked my interest in knowing how do elderly women activate socio-organizational networks to enable entrepreneurial ventures. What spatial traces do these activities leave within their homes in a dense urban fabric? I studied the lives of 6 women staying in South Bombay to the northern suburbs of the city. I connected with these elderly women from age 60 to 80 through my grandmother to learn more about their challenges and strategies that vary with the neighborhood they inhabit. With the help of photography and sketched floor plans as a medium to document their home setups, I gained insights into how their home adapts to their work requirements. I observed how they balanced work and family life within limited spaces, often rearranging furniture to accommodate business needs. I also noticed how other family members, especially men, use these spaces differently during and outside of business hours. To understand their community connections, I conducted semi structured interviews, learning about their support networks like customers, helpers, and participation of family members in certain parts of the process. Finally, I use daily and monthly charts to track their routines and how they balance work with household chores, considering factors like age, seasonal changes, and external events. I'll be taking you through three such stories of lives of these working elderly women. The first one being Dabbawali. Megha got married at 25 and moved to Khar into a small busy home with her husband. The house had just two bedrooms, a kitchen, and a hall shared by over 15 people. Her mother in law introduced her to the family's main business, a tiffin service that supplied meals to office workers and hospital staff across Khar, Santa Cruz, and Bandra. At first, juggling housework and the business was tough, but Megha soon adapted knowing the family relied on this income. When her mother in law passed away, the business paused for a few years, and the men found other sources of income. Eventually, they restarted the tiffin service but on a smaller scale, driven by demands from loyal customers. Every morning at 5 a.m., the men go to collect groceries from the market while Megha and her sister in law prep and cook carefully, splitting tasks. Megha makes chapatis and sabzis while her sister in law cooks dal and rice. The veranda serves as a waiting area for customers who arrive early, where they until their family finishes, sit patiently until tiffins are ready. This limited serving hour has allowed Megha and her family to finish their work by early afternoon, leaving the rest of the day free for household chores and personal time in the evening. At first, they used steel tiffin boxes to pack their daily meals, but it became difficult to wash them every day and store them. Hence, they started using disposable foil containers, making packaging simpler and more manageable. Over the past 4 years, Megha's health has worsened after COVID. Cooking such large meals has become exhausting at the age of 64, so she now takes adequate rest in the afternoon. When Megha cannot manage the kitchen work on sicker days, her daughter steps in to help. Megha stays committed to cooking nutritious meals with her family's support and her customers' appreciation. Thus by thus, Meena has always lived near CP Tank in South Bombay, helping her family as long as she can remember. Her father was a daily wage worker, so she started working young to support her family. By age 10, she was cleaning floors, washing dishes, and doing laundry for neighbors. After long days of work, she made paper bags to sell to a local Bhelpuri seller. Meena wasn't able to go to school as a teenager and was married to a man from within her community. When her children were born, she was determined to give them a good education. At 67, Meena still worked in people's houses until the local MLA offered elderly women free machines such as iron, spice grinder, and flour grinder for personal use. Meena chose the flour grinder because it was compact, required less physical effort, and offered an opportunity to earn an additional income. After receiving the grinder, she began grinding flour for her neighbors. Her room in the chawl is only 10 by 10 meters, so she moved her chulha outside to make space for the machine. She grinds flour right in the chawl's alleyway, serving customers quickly and then carefully stores the machine indoors when done. Most of her customers are local women who bring different grains. She grinds the flour on the spot, offering quick and reliable service. Meena's husband and son are away most of the day, so she cleans the flour dust in the evening to tidy her home before they return. At 72, the noise and crowd in the alley sometimes frustrates her, especially during peak hours. Moreover, to give her body the rest it requires, she takes some time off in the afternoons. Despite earning well, Meena does not want to move to a better home. She values a network of customers and hopes the chawl will redevelop soon, allowing her to expand her small business without losing her community. Expansion. Muktaben started a papad making business in 1995 at age 34 to support her three children's education. She, along with her family, had moved from Valsad, Gujarat to Churni Road, South Bombay for better opportunities. While her husband sold vegetables in the morning, Muktaben experimented to create the perfect papad recipe. After many tries, she succeeded and began selling to neighbors. Using the earnings, she gradually increased the quantity of production and expanded her customer base, going door to door with bags of papad. Back then, communication was hard as only a few people had phones, so customers would let her know in advance when they needed more. By age 40, her business had grown, but a small 6 by 12-meter home was not sufficient to allow larger production. So she began drying them on building's roof, even though it was hard to reach. Balancing carefully, she climbed up with her family passing trays to her. She used plastic mesh to protect the papads from birds and kept an eye on the weather, drying them early on cloudy days. As demand grew, Muktaben's family stepped in to help. Her sister-in-law accompanied her in the preparation process, while her husband and brother-in-law handled the finances. Soon the roof wasn't enough, so she used parked cars in her lane, spreading sheets over them. This clever method made her well known in the neighborhood by the tag "Gaadi pe papad sukhane wali auntie." To keep up with the demand, she bought a small papad making machine, and the whole family worked from 8 to 8 in the evening. The, uh, to earn more, she expanded her product line, making snacks like chorafali, rice papad, and homemade chips using the courtyard for frying. Today, at 68, Muktaben runs a well known business, especially popular during festivals. With a large machine, her business is efficient, allowing her to balance work and family smoothly. Similarly, I have worked on such short stories that I would like to talk about briefly. The hometown that talks about Shobna Shah, a 75-year-old woman who operates a successful spice and pickle business with her friends. Despite facing adversity in her early life, she pursued her entrepreneurial dream. She overcame challenges related to space constraints, family obligations, and evolving technology. The Pink Table, where Bharti, a 76-year-old woman, established a home based garland making business. Despite facing financial challenges, she turned her hobby into a source of income. Her dedication to her craft and her family's support have contributed to the success of her business. And lastly, balancing acts that talk about Sultana, a skilled makeup artist who shifted her focus from makeup service to tutoring after marriage. Despite financial challenges and household responsibilities, she established a successful tutoring business from home. Her dedication to her students and her family's support has enabled her to balance her career and personal life. The emerging argument from this study shows how elderly women running home businesses transform their home and family roles. Despite physical challenges, these women prove resourceful and resilient, breaking stereotypes of aging and gender. They adapt their living spaces to support both business and family life, often involving family members and neighbors to create a supportive network. By taking on leadership roles, they reshape household power dynamics and family responsibilities, actively contributing to family finances. Their actions show that aging can bring ongoing productivity and social value, challenging the common view of elderly women as passive or limited in their roles. Thank you.
Thank you, Prachi. May I now request Avantika Padalkar to present her thesis of hybrid spaces apartment typologies.
This thesis examines how spatial configurations within Mumbai's BHK apartments adapt to multiple uses, addressing the growing needs addressing the growing needs for flexibility. By exploring how spaces transform to accommodate work, leisure, and daily routines, the study aims to highlight how hybrid uses can influence apartment layouts to better meet modern urban challenges. The hypothesis is that the spatial configuration of BHK apartment is limited in its accommodation to support diverse activities and adapt to evolving needs. The research asks how can hybrid use and multifunctionality influence or reshape the BHK apartment typology. Haberken's type as a social agreement and Munoz on typology both emphasize typology as an adaptable, socially driven concept shaped by cultural agreements. They argue that types evolve through collective practices, adapting to social needs over time, paralleling my thesis on multifunctional spaces in Mumbai's BHK apartment, where hybrid uses redefine traditional typologies for modern urban living. To understand the same, I focused on three apartments in Mumbai: one, the home of an artist running drawing classes; two, a boutique run from a designer's bedroom; and third, a baker conducting classes from her living area. Each shows how residents adapt limited spaces to accommodate both work and personal life, illustrating multifunctionality and compact homes. The fieldwork is centered around two questions. What are the multifunctions, diverse activities? Where do the hybrid spaces get formed? Shilpa Chavan, A 47-year-old artist has been running art classes from her home for 15 years. To accommodate the classes, Shilpa and her husband, a sculptor, have adapted their living space, which is used as a classroom during weekdays. The couple's ability to transform their home for both teaching and family use highlights how spatial design can support multifunctions within a limited space. During class, the space gradually fills with students as they settle, engage with Shilpa, and work on their drawings. Meanwhile, the family members continue their routines, moving around the class without disrupting it. The removal of the kitchen wall and the new entrance from the living room open up the space, making the room feel larger and more suitable for the class. The arrangement of furniture and materials supports multiple uses, allowing the home to transition from private life to a shared creative environment. This shows how changes in spatial layout can afford different activities within the same space. This drawing demonstrates the use of living room without the class context. As the class concludes, the space transitions back into its daily role within the home. The space returns to a more relaxed atmosphere but maintains its multifunctionality. Family members settle in and the room adapts to accommodate various daily activities. One family member may start reading while other works on their personal artwork. The living room, with its open layout, allows for transitions between activities, whether informal gatherings for meals or moments of solitude. During evening, the space shifts again, becoming a place for relaxation and conversation. Shalini, a 52-year-old woman, has been running a home based tailoring business for over 30 years, balancing her professional work with family responsibilities. Due to the limited space in her apartment, she transforms her bedroom into a multifunctional space, serving as both a personal retreat and a consultation room for her clients. From 4 p.m. to 8 p.m., the room shifts seamlessly into a workspace. This drawing illustrates the transformation of Shalini's bedroom into a boutique between 4 p.m. and 8 p.m., showing how the space shifts from private retreat to a functional commercial area. As the boutique opens, the room is reorganized to accommodate the new function. The bed is surrounded by wardrobes and cabinets that store boutique items like clothes and accessories. Shalini arranges a stool near the bed for clients to sit and have design discussions with her. During fittings, clients are asked to use common bathroom instead of bedroom for privacy. The stool is tucked under the sink when not in use. Throughout this transformation, the bedroom serves as a personal space for Shalini and her clients while ensuring privacy, no men are allowed in the bedroom. Meanwhile, other areas of the apartments are shifted into a private zones, keeping the bedroom dedicated to the boutique's purpose. By the evening, the room returns to its original state with the bed clear of boutique items and the space returned to its personal space. The second drawing continues to explore the spatial dynamics of the apartment, focusing on the period before the boutique opens in the evening. During the day, Shalini's bedroom reverts to its original role as a private space free of boutique items. The living room becomes a hub for family activities, serving various needs for relaxation, work, or socializing. By having dedicated wardrobes for personal belongings and boutique stock, the home maintains a clear separation between business and personal use. This arrangement allows the apartment to fluidly shift between supporting family life during the day and transforming into a workspace in the evening, showing how an apartment can accommodate different functions throughout the day. Vaishali Nagori, a 47-year baker, teaches baking classes from her home with the help of a daughter and a helper. The classes take place in a designated area between the kitchen and living room where all the materials and ingredients are organized for the students. During the class, the transformation of the space between Vaishali's living room and kitchen into a baking space area is in the afternoon. Before the class begins, she arranges a table and chairs for students to work. The living room furniture accommodates baking accessories, tools, and ingredients alongside everyday items, allowing for the class without allowing for the class without disrupting the space's primary functions. No students are allowed in the private areas like bedrooms, maintaining the privacy of those spaces. This highlights how the living room serves as dual purposes, supporting both domestic life and the baking class seamlessly. Further, the drawing continues focusing on the afternoon when no baking class is taking place. In this scenario, the space between the living room and kitchen returns to its original state. The living room, now free from baking setup, is used for family activities such as watching TV or casual gatherings. The kitchen remains dedicated to personal cooking tasks. The areas of the home flow naturally, with each room serving its intended purpose without the need for rearrangement, highlighting how the house accommodates different functions. Through observing these cases, I have learned how the transitional spaces between rooms, such as passageways, planters, or kitchen entrances, can be creatively adapted for hybrid use. Examples include the placement of stools under the sink, a slim cabinet in the passage replacing a wall to separate the kitchen from the living room, and the use of space between the kitchen and living room for baking instead of traditional dining area. These adaptations highlight the potential for maximizing space and functionality in ways that blend domestic needs for practical design solutions. In conclusion, this thesis highlights how hybrid use and multifunctionality in BHK apartments can enhance living, especially in dense cities like Mumbai. By balancing optimization and affordance, spaces are designed not just for efficiency but also for flexibility, allowing residents to repurpose areas to changing needs. Elements like movable partitions and adaptable furniture create fluid environments where a living room can double as a workspace or a bedroom as a creative studio. This adaptability addresses the growing demands for work from home setups and evolving lifestyle, maximizing the value of compact spaces, creating versatile living environment that seamlessly adjusts to the changing needs of the residents, ultimately making everyday life more efficient and comfortable. Thank you.
Thank you, Avantika. Uh, may I invite Akansha to present her thesis on apartments and climate adaptation in Mumbai.
One sees many things that apartments are doing. They're retrofitted with temporary coverings, altered layouts, or rebuilt entirely through redevelopment, which is why I'm inquiring into this. I therefore ask, how do DCR shape the spatial affordances of apartments in Mumbai to adapt to the changing climate and everyday life? The 1967 DCR set the base FSI to 1.33 for the island city and 1 for the suburbs. Building heights were limited to 1.5 times the width of the adjacent road. Setbacks ranged from 10 to 15 feet on all sides, and balconies were up to 4 feet wide, were free of FSI. The 1991 DCRs kept the base FSI for Island City 1.33 and introduced additional FSI and TDR in the suburbs. Building heights were regulated by FSI and road width with maximum height of 1.5 times the width of the road. Setbacks were based on building height ranging from 3.6 to 20 meters, and balconies were included in the FSI. The present 2034 DCR set the base FSI for 3 for the island city and 2.5 for the suburbs. Building heights could be 3 times the sum of the road width and front open space. Setbacks were based on the building height with side and rear setbacks calculated as height divided by 5 and additional setbacks determined by plot depth. Balconies were free of FSI up to 10% of the built up area, and beyond that, they were included in the FSI. In conclusion, earlier DCRs allowed for lower FSI, which kept the ground coverage smaller and allowed for more open and shared spaces within the plot. Now, the open spaces are significantly reduced and are only restricted to the setbacks. Additionally, older DCRs allowed for balconies, which provided a thicker building skin, giving residents more usable space. My analytical framework looks at how DCR shapes housing design, focusing on the relationship between building form and household use. It explores how weather affects comfort and households adapt while examining how DCRs enable or limit these adaptations. I chose Dolat Nagar Borivali for my research. The area has old low-rise buildings and new high-rise and is prone to flooding from the Hisar River. I studied 3 buildings under different DCRs, analyzing 1 ground floor and 1 top floor apartment. The first building is the G+2 low-rise apartment built in 1970, originally a bungalow converted into an apartment. Located on a 942 square meter plot, the building has 2 wings and 24 flats. The majority of residents are from Gujarati and Jain communities, where other communities make up around 10%. Over time, many original owners have moved out, renting or leaving the apartment vacant. The plot follows the 1967 DCR with one-third ground coverage and ample open space. It incorporates balconies up to 4 feet, modulating the building skin. The building height is similar to the road width to ensure light ventilation and to maintain low profile. Setbacks range from 13 to 17 feet. I studied 2 apartments in B wing, H1 on the ground floor and H2 on the second floor. H1, the Patel family has lived in this apartment since 1970. 4 members currently reside here. The elder son, the patriarch of the family, is a rickshaw driver, his wife, a homemaker, and their 2 sons. Previously, the house accommodated 12 members, including the younger son's family. Due to limited space, they reduced the bathroom size to create a separate kitchen with other rooms used for living activities. To manage space, the younger son and his wife once slept near the bathroom passage. After the parents passed away, the two families shared the kitchen but had separate rooms, refrigerators, and cupboards with a partition added for privacy. In 2016, the younger son's family moved out, leaving their room unused. To adapt, the family removed the balcony wall to create a second entrance, which is now the main one, and extended the balcony grill for storage. The older entrance and that part of the house are now used for storage, and the former kitchen was repurposed as living room. The family faces frequent flooding due to water release from Sanjay Gandhi National Park Dam. Heavy rains often raise water levels to 3 to 4 feet, with severe floods like in 2005 submerging the house up to the ceiling and destroying furniture and electronics. In 2019, a similar flood caused damage. The house also had structural issues like sagging kitchen ceiling, cracks, and persistent dampness throughout the year. To cope with flooding and dampness, the family has implemented several strategies. The kitchen is fully tiled and Kadapa stone is used for cupboard to prevent water damage. Before each flood, they empty the fridge, move blankets and bedding to the loft, and place a tarpaulin sheet over the balcony. The sofa is made of stainless steel to avoid water damage, and the house is repainted every 5 years. During summer, the ground floor room stays cooler due to old tiles. The most crucial adaptation in this construction is the construction of lofts and shelves above the water level, providing safe storage for valuables. Therefore, while the DCRs allow modifications like repurposing the kitchen and extending the balcony for storage for their daily needs, these changes help adapt to limited space but don't significantly improve flood resilience. The family still relies on temporary solutions like moving valuables to lofts and shifting bedding during monsoons, highlighting that while DCRs offer partial flexibility, it doesn't fully address climate adaptation. The second family has lived in this apartment for over 22 years, having moved from Nal Bazar, South Bombay. The family includes a 70-year-old matriarch, her son in his mid-40s who works at a clothing shop, his wife who manages household duties and serves as building treasurer, and the 17-year-old twin daughters. Initially, the two-room apartment was cramped with bedroom offering little privacy and the other room serving as both living and kitchen. To improve functionality, they combined the toilet and bathroom to create a separate kitchen, allowing better organization, privacy, and a clearer division of spaces. The households had adapted the apartment to maximize space. The kitchen has shelves for essentials, with the daughter-in-law working alone due to limited space. The couple and the children shared a bedroom with an AC and bed added for comfort 6 years ago. The cupboard was moved to the balcony and shelves for grains were added. Activities like flour grinding are done in the living room. The family faces ongoing maintenance issues. For 22 years, they have shared terrace damp-proofing costs with 7 other flats, but summer heat and dampness still causes discomfort. Poor kitchen ventilation adds to problems and moisture causes wall cracks and bulging. Regular cleaning and repairs are needed to address leaks, cracked windows, and structural damage. To manage dampness, the family uses durable materials like wrought iron and kadapa stone. The kitchen is tiled to prevent leaks, mold is cleaned with wet cloths, and insects are kept out with chalk barriers. The balcony has Zolpuri tile cladding, only essentials are kept in the kitchen, and grains are stored in the balcony, maintaining a clutter-free space. Therefore, living on the top floor, the family struggles with heat in summer and dampness during monsoon, as the societies are limited in terms of maintenance, causing leakages. The societies are not taking the initiative to cover the roof, as the DCR restricts roof coverage unless it adheres to specific heights and guidelines. If it has to be covered, it has to be of certain height. Also, while the DCR allows for a thicker building skin, It doesn't fully address weather challenges. The family relies on temporary solutions like annual damp proofing and moisture resistant materials. Built in 1991, this building redeveloped a bungalow and a chawl into an apartment. The second building, with an FSI of 1 and plot area of 953 square meter, has two wings. A wing contains 11 1 BHK apartments ranging from 360 to 390 square feet, while B wing has 18 apartments ranging from 150 to 225 square feet. The plot follows the 1991 DCR with the building height set to 1.5 times the road width. Setbacks based on height divided by 3 and range from 3.7 meters to 8.8 meters. There are no shared open spaces or balconies in this building. I studied two apartments, H3 on the ground floor of A wing and H4 on the top floor of B wing. The third household now consists of five members: the younger son, a graphic designer, his wife, who offers beauty and mehndi services, and his parents, with the father retired from an embroidery business and the mother formerly managing a clothing side business. They have experienced flooding 4 times. Instead of a bed, they use a foldable mattress hung from a ceiling to prevent damage. After floods, they face about a foot of mud filled with snakes, insects, and debris, taking 7 to 10 days to clean. Previously, they stored enough grains for the entire year, but since the 2005 floods, they only store half of what they used to. The fourth household consists of five members: a 50-year-old patriarch who is a glass supplier, his wife who is a homemaker, their two daughters, and a son. In this household, the west-facing window and poor airflow results in hot, poorly lit interior, making the family rely on artificial light and fans throughout the day. The third building is a 10-story building built in 2018 with 18 flats. Each floor has two apartments, except the eighth, which has a refugee area, and the 10th, which has a single apartment. Saikrupa building, built on stilts to address the local flooding, was redeveloped from a low-rise G+3 to a high-rise. With an FSI of 3.4, it has a built-up area of 1600 square meter on 440 square meter plot, housing 18 apartments, including 1 BHK and 2 BHK, each of 450 and 500 square feet. The building follows the latest DCR with a height less than 3 times the road width plus front open space. Setbacks based on height divided by 5 and range from 3 to 5.5 meters. There are no shared open spaces or balconies. The Limbacha family resides in a 1 BHK apartment on the first floor of a high-rise building where they have lived for the past 4 years. The household includes the patriarch, his wife, and their two young daughters. The patriarch works in stock marketing trading, while the wife is a homemaker. The family reconfigured the apartment to maximize space. The bedroom became a living area, the toilet was turned into a toy room, and a hidden storage room was added behind a mirror. The living room is now shared bedroom for the couple and children, where the wife spends most of the day. The kitchen was extended to the edge of the facade, and an AC was installed 3 years ago. The south-facing bedroom gets plenty of natural light, but the living room stays dark due to a nearby building. The first floor needs artificial light during the day, especially when the curtains are closed. Summer electricity bills reach up to 4,000, and the corridor is completely dark in monsoon and winters. While DCR allows for larger windows for ventilation and light, factors like building orientation and nearby structures limit their effectiveness. As a result, households depend on artificial cooling and lighting, raising energy use. Also, the fixed BHK design limits adaptability, forcing households to make only smaller interior changes. Finally, I would like to conclude my thesis with 3 points. Earlier setbacks provided more ground to absorb water, allowing it to percolate and improve airflow and ventilation. However, as open spaces have diminished, this has resulted in harsher climates, particularly during hot weather or rains. Second, the building skin, which afforded climatic conditions, has been reduced, while the roof remains unchanged, and this is a perennial condition in the apartment buildings. Third, while DCRs have modernized housing and maximized build forms, they have reduced the spatial flexibility needed for adapting to changing weather. Older homes with balconies and open spaces offered buffers against the elements and allowed for informal, low-tech adaptations. In contrast, newer buildings prioritize infrastructure resilience, such as stilts, to prevent flooding, but sacrifice spatial resilience. With less open space and no balconies, these buildings limit informal adaptations, forcing households to rely on mechanical systems for cooling and ventilation. Thank you.
I wish I had the power to say Alexa speed 4, you know, but there's so much to say. And in all what was said, I think the keywords that kind of define this panel were the idea of flexibility, adjustment, accommodation, and actually not in necessarily the positive way, but actually as a compromise. And I think that is what points at a certain anomaly or a mismatch in the nature of nature of activity that is happening and the shape of the container that it is sitting in. And this is what hints at the misalignment between life and type, which is the ground for operative architecture. And a lot of, I mean, if we read the history of type, uh, it was initiated as a retrospective tool to classify the huge corpus of architectural material to make patterns and read kind of the evolution of space. But I mean, its relationship to life came only in certain moments when, for example, Robin Evans talks of the way in which lines in a plan set up the relationship between life and space, or you have Habraken or Bill Hilliers with the social contract and stuff like that. And so type, if we were to really think of type as a generative tool to order social life, then what are the entry points we have? And so it always remains in an estranged relationship with social life. And that's where I think all the three theses are trying to push the limit of how do you, I mean, they present very different stories, but contained in this very restrictive kind of container, which are trying to spill out, operate in different way. And the question that they're really asking is that through what infrastructures then do people expand the limits of the type? And so I'm very eager to open this up to you and have your thoughts on this.
So thank you, all three of you, for these very actually very interesting elaborations of, I won't call it type, but forms of living. Forms. Okay. So forms of living and inhabiting. Um, and one of the things which it seems like I am the only person who's not read the textbooks, because you used this idea of type in architecture, hmm, and the container word that you used. So there, I felt there was a sense of an assumption of what a house is actually supposed to be. Uh, Now, where that assumption is coming from, like that the house is only supposed to, the house has never been of singular use. The house is not a place you go and sleep. Even the government, when it plans, like I write about this on the DDA, that the idea there is this heteronormative family which is going to have a 2 BHK, which will have two children, one girl, one boy. Then the girl will get married, boy will bring wife home, you know. So these are all, in a sense, what I'm trying to ask you, because you've done very interesting theses, um, to question the assumptions of the frames that you have worked with. Hmm? Who decided, uh, also who is the elderly? Elderly kuch nahi hai. I mean, there's a very interesting book called No Aging in India by Lawrence Cohen, okay, which is looking at this idea, and he's an anthropologist of medical anthropology, um, and he explains this thing of this categoricalness of aging in India does not develop. Okay, so what interestingly, in one of your examples, you said this lady got married into a house where she was 25 and she started helping her mother-in-law in the business, right? So is she 25 and aged, or is she not, or is her mother-in-law aged? So the thing is that where do you put that categorical thing of who is aged and who is not? Because we are not only looking at jobs of retirement ke baad aging, and also like everybody, even like in Bombay, people always say that, in India people say that my parents after retirement have become even more hyperactive. Hmm? So it is a category that is given in the social structure, but not everybody in India has, jobs which are about retirement. People continue to exist, live, and do things. So it'll be interesting if you question the assumptions in your title. So elderly women make their lives productive beyond the cartographic. So there is another assumption in this. Sorry, huh? There is an assumption of what is productive and not productive. Okay, and the sphere of the domestic has been defined, and the feminine has been defined as not productive. Work, women's work, especially the householder, is always been put in the non-productive category. But of course, what is interesting is that you are looking at what is marketably productive, right? They're all doing things which have a sense of a market to it. They're earning money out of it. But I I think you have a very interesting set of case studies. Uh, I would have been more calm. Sorry, am I calm? I would have been more calm if you had just looked at this as women's work and the use of the home space rather than um, fixing it in the category of elderly, productive, because this, so women, how they are using these spaces. This is Bombay. Bombay, this is happening from a place like small place in rooms in Dharavi to Borivali to, to maybe Parsi households in Khosrow Bagh. You know, it's also a city which compels a certain marketability of form and materials that are produced in the house, and then there's always a market which is absorbing them. So the business city, the dabbas, everything, right? So it'll be also, uh, why could we not think of this as a adaptive use project rather than a elderly women project? And every house has something like this happening in your system. So I'm just saying, kind of like, because you've done the work, you've done the field work, you've seen this so up close, it'll be interesting for you to question the assumptions in your own question. And like, as a anthropologist who teaches in architecture schools and has, I've always felt that there is a typology assumption कि दुनिया ऐसी है, और फिर वाह लोग ऐसे कर रहे हैं, लेकिन लोग एक्चुअली वैसे ही कर रहे हैं, वो आपकी किताब की टाइपोलॉजी, वो टेक्स्ट बुक की टाइपोलॉजी है. The world has actually all been functioning like this for a long time. So then plasticity, except uh, she has this whole project which she Anuradha Siddiqui's project. You can look at it. It's on some of it is on the net, where she's looking at domestic spaces as insurgent spaces. But my question to that would be that who says they are not, and who is defining what is insurgent? Because domesticity has been, domestic means this, and so anyways, okay, next is Avantika. हाँ? इतना छोटा नाम लिखा है, hybrid. Okay, similar kind of line of thought. You use the term hybrid spaces, apartment typologies, as something that, um, so, in social theory, there is the word hybrid is used a lot by this man called Homi Bhabha. Um, Hybridity is a term that we borrow from biology, from Mendel, right? Mendel का experiment था, एक बीज है, दूसरा बीज है, फिर वो जुड़ गए. What is the assumption that though original seeds existed in a pure form, and then when they were mixed up, they became hybrids. I mean, I have a very particular issue about hybridity because it assumes that something already exists in a pure form. Nobody actually exists in a pure form. Only in the periodic table there is pure form, and the periodic table is not real in the world. It's only a table. It's only a taxonomical exercise. when the elements are separated in its form of the manifestation, it exists in combinations. Okay, so this is just a like a kind of a philosophical response to the word hybrid, and but I think even so you looked at very interesting use again, adaptive use of space, and all these different fantastical ways that the house is being used, that lady setting up those drawers, the makeup person, um what, and you did these movement diagrams जो मुझे बिल्कुल समझ नहीं आते हैं, by the way. Maybe I should attend Kashi's class for all this. Now uh, it's in the form of showing the diagrammatic. I think your ethnography was less, right? So you I understood more from a set of photographs. I mean, maybe I am just bad at reading diagrams. But uh, the way, what would have been interesting is, because women are continuously designing. This is something, whenever I teach in architecture school, I'm like, who is the first designer and who's the first architect you encounter in your lives? There's this continuous obsession of managing the space, whether it is putting an interior design type, एक cushion ऐसा सीधा कर दिया, or just go to kitchen racks. There's this continuous obsession that whether your mother's cook or not will have with it. They will do something, कभी उधर लगा दिया, कभी कुछ कर दिया, कभी ये एक extension बना दिया, कभी एक अलग डब्बा रख दिया for the oil. And that is design. That is, so actually your work is very embedded in that kind of like internal house designing. Uh, and because of the things that they're doing, how are they making, like, I mean, you had the one with lady with the papad on the, no, that was her, okay, sorry. um no, I mean, that is a fantastic use of placemaking, actually, that she was able to like find place in a place city like Bombay without having a roof to uh, but to think of movement not as just visual, but what does it mean for actually design and use, right? And that's how I would kind of think of it. And also, this is haunting of what is domestic. What is domestic? Domestic क्या होता है? I mean, dogs can be domesticated. What is gender, feminine? What is, like, the thing is, somewhere your evidences, your all the work that you guys have done is reflecting to that idea that actually these categories are false. You have gathered the evidence that these category, that domestic means only one thing, but the idea is that why does domestic not mean that a woman can run a thing in the house and earn her money? So I'm saying, like, try in your, at least in your conclusions, have the conversation on the fact that you would want to question the categories that are provided. And the typology book, textbook that Anuj will give me. What is the textbook of typologies of housing? Oh my God. Trauma. मुझे trauma हो रहा है सुन के. Anyways, I'm saying that it's very interesting, your work, all three of you actually hit at this. Yours is in a way very differently technical, where you use this DCR thing. But don't you think that everybody is doing this? And if you live in Bombay, you are dealing with rain. And I mean, yes, there was like one of the flats you said was on the top floor, so of course it has an extra layer of things. But I don't know, you saw that image of the Ambani house that was with the blue tarp. Like, the blue tarp is ubiquitous in Bombay. It is used in Dharavi. It is used in probably in what is it, Dadar, everywhere. So everybody has a relationship with the blue tarp because everybody has to have a relationship with the rain and house and protection. And everybody will have to think of how fungus comes in, and you will put your, I mean, I used to put my sambar powder in the freezer because in the monsoons everything get destroyed. Like masalas get destroyed. Like there's a way that you are automated. Your chappals will suddenly be growing. You know, all of you seen the Bombay monsoon. So I'm saying what is interesting is that your argument is not actually just about the specific houses. It's a much larger argument. Apartment and climate was making me very confused as a title. I think adaptations, forms of living and inhabiting, and the Bombay rain and the apartment in the Bombay rain. Everyone has to think about it. Also, it's always very interesting, like because I've lived in Bombay and I've lived in Delhi, and what I miss in Delhi is Delhi did not think about anything. Okay, like we do not have this chacha in a lot of buildings. And then when it suddenly goes like climate change, monsoon rain, and just dealing with like पता नहीं कहाँ से क्या आ रहा है, कुछ नहीं समझ आ रहा है. Bombay में at least that I think every builder from time immemorial has thought about it, except for Ambani's. So, so in a sense, it will also be interesting to see the material life of this. Like, what are the forms and materials that get introduced in the house? Like you hinted at it in different in that one where you I think you showed something like a curtain or something that they had changed. So adaptation on use of furniture, movement of furniture, general dealing with fungus and everything, and then also the other categories of materiality that are part of um, yeah, Bombay built environments. Okay, so thanks, guys. Mm,
Yeah, so your question with regards to age and productivity. So, um, yeah, the idea of age comes from this concept of retirement, which is there ki 60 से 65, yeah, एक बार you're above that age, then that is considered as someone who is old or elderly, as to say. And then there's this notion of them then becoming passive members of the society, someone who is dependent. And the and then productivity for them becomes something very different, where they have to continue this sense of identity in the social or in the neighborhood or in the social realm, to say, and also to have a sense of purpose for themselves in the society. So productivity, earlier, that the concept that came from industrialization, where you must be efficient in using your time and energy to reach a particular goal, then becomes something for your own self, the sense of the sense of belonging. Yet, because this is what I have also experienced in my house with my grandmother herself, the reason for her to work right now is not something कि मेरे को पैसा चाहिए, but it is कि मैं क्या करूँ that people yet think that I am purposeful. So majority of these women that I studied come from this aspect, and then the second point that they put forward is the monetary thing, but the first is always the self identity that they want to impose in the society. So, and also to agree with your point about adaptive use and women being very creative in these places or in these areas, ki it is like a living room is not just a place where people sit and chat, but also a place where customers can come collect their orders. And these creative, not just through the idea of utility as a particular space, but Also, multifunctionality is always mixed with the use part of it.
So you said about assumptions, like how people assume कि bedroom में ये होना चाहिए. So like if you think कि like everybody like has given a like specific a definition to like the bedroom has the idea, which is very consolidated. So like no affordance can happen in the bedroom. Like a master bedroom is just a private space, and like udhari, like there will be a bathroom attached to the master bedroom. So the whole space is considered as a private space. So like things happening in the bedroom is very rare. Like people like even in the living room, like people think कि ठीक है living room में we can do some things, but a boutique happening in the bedroom, it's a different. And so like when you said the internal house design, like how women keeps on changing everything, during the drawing class thing, the whole setup will keep on changing. Like how the student will adapt the living room, the furniture would keep on changing every day. The things would be also would be set on different places. So yeah, I agree with you that point. Like internal changes keeps on happening. Like even the small things changes.
Rahul and Matthias on the house workshop. They looked at herbs का website देख लेना. They looked at this lady's house, older woman, old lady, who got a house built in Dharavi for 2.5 lakh rupees to the contractor, and she literally she used to live on the first floor, and the lower space was used for running like a whole kind of like business, making things, papad, other things, and then she would give it out for slots. So she made money out of it also. So they looked at it as they changed the definition, the typology of the house, and they kind of proposed the idea of the house workshop machine, something like that. I mean, they do these tool house. Yes, tool house. I used to teach this. Oh my god, I'm forgetting. The tool house essay. Just Google tool house herbs. And that's a very interesting, I mean, I found it very useful as a typology of productivity. Like then the house is completely different. And also like in Delhi, I've always known like in cities, you always, especially big cities, you will always have some uncle, like all my life, some uncle from some other smaller town living in your drawing room for 5 years. Okay. Or someone, mama's son will come and stay. So the how then what, and I'm sure some of you experienced this too, right? So this thing of so I think Bombay में ये productivity का pressure बहुत ज़्यादा है. um, Very anxiety ridden place. लेकिन दिल्ली में किनशिप का प्रेशर ज्यादा है मेरे हिसाब से. बॉम्बे में भी है किनशिप. तो वो घर बिकम्स लाइक अ लिटिल हॉस्टल ओनली. गद्दे डल जाते हैं शाम को, वो रोल हो जाते हैं, फिर वो सोफा का निकाल के गद्दे डलते थे. So these things are all part of the house machine, whatever, you know.
So as you mentioned कि ये तो बॉम्बे में सब जगह होता है. You were right, but this particular neighborhood, it was interesting because initially during the 1920s, 30s, this was a plotted scheme which had bungalows. In during the 60s and 70s, it got transformed, like it got transformed to low-rise apartments. The entire neighborhood got transformed. But when the floods started coming, after that the neighborhood, matlab, these tilted buildings started, high-rise tilted buildings started coming over here. But they took the aspect of flood into consideration while making those high-rise buildings. But there are other factors also, because of the setbacks that have reduced or the open spaces that have reduced. There are other factors such as ventilation, light, also that those factors have not taken into consideration. Only that aspect of flood has been taken into consideration. So
Right. I'll start with the individual questions, comments first. So, Prachi, in your case, my question is, are you arguing that age has something to do with the way in which the house changes to accommodate for that function, or in other words, if I replace that old woman with an old man who is doing some other work in the house, do you feel that the the entire house will work differently? So has gender got anything to do with how this negotiation happens? Uh, the same question could be asked for age also. Now, interestingly, in the stories you mentioned that many of them have been doing it since quite some time. So they have been doing it when they were 25 years old, they are still doing it when they are 60 years old. So I'm interested in knowing, has anything changed in the way the house operates when they were 30 years old and doing this work versus when, apart from of course getting tired or signs of old age, but the negotiation that happens, okay? Or do you think that uh, uh, their percentage contribution in household income affects the way negotiation has happened? As in, whether the work that is being done in the house is the primary source of income, is the other source of income equal or more or less? And since you have delved into great detail into that stories, you also mentioned that at places the way negotiation is happening. Uh, and I found it fascinating that in the discussion you brought out this question of being purposeful. And when there was a question of retirement and what is old age. Uh, so I think the definition of, or we start using the word retirement primarily when we are looking at an employee-employer kind of situation, right? Not in a business. So if I'm running a shop, I don't retire. So in that context, in the different case studies that you looked at, do you think that any of these works, whether it is the dabbawali or the floor grinder, do you think there is a concept of retirement in any of these cases? Is what I would like you to elaborate on. Yeah. Uh, Now, Avantika, I was quite intrigued when you were showing these things in detail, and I find that more than the drawings, when I read your text, which is describing how quickly or how that transformation happens and where the guests are allowed or not, you are going into detail. I do feel that maybe just by looking at the drawings, it's not captured. What captured my attention was a few things. One, in the case of the baking, the house where baking is happening, that baking class table, is it a folding table which is put away somewhere? Because okay, so then it must not be very sturdy, because if it's a folding, and so I'm imagining if I'm rolling out something to bake, it must be something that shakes a bit or is unstable, or it's a stable foldable chair, table. I'm Yeah, yeah, still I know the, so the legs fold. So normally when those kind of things you unfold and then you move it a bit, it shakes. So I'm just wondering, five people, if they're simultaneously rolling out something maida as a covering, what happens. But through this, I also want to get into through. I mean, this question intrigued me because I was getting deeper and deeper into what you were trying to articulate, and I think getting those kind of nuances is very important. But the other thing that intrigued me is that, so again, continuing with the house in which baking was happening, the way the table was placed in the living room, and the fact that you mentioned that kitchen is out of bounds for the people who attend the classes, right? But I found it very interesting that the way the table was positioned, it was cutting off the kitchen living room from the bedroom and the toilet. So, and it was positioned in such a way that if as a family member I am in the bedroom when the class starts, I can't go to the kitchen because there's simply no space. The table was blocking it. That means before the class starts, if I'm a if I'm a family member who is not part of the classes, you said the mother and the daughter sometimes helps. Before the class starts, I have to take a call. Do I want to be in the living room or the bedroom for the entire duration of the class? I find the same thing, similar interesting things happening that in the case where it was the lady, I think the designer, which operates in the bedroom. Interestingly, the clients and the lady are trapped in a bedroom, and the house engulfs that bedroom. Okay? Whereas in the first case, which was the drawing class, because the drawing class happens in the living room, the family members are trapped in the bedroom kitchen area. They can't go out of the house without walking through the drawing class. So I felt that these were interesting observations, or these kind of observations I find interesting. If you could tie it back then to the idea of the type of the house. What about the exact position of the bedroom or the exact size of the dining space in the baking class created these kind of negotiated conditions? And to me, a simple way of doing that would be to uh, uh, just imagine that in the drawing class house, I am conducting the baking class, and figure out what would change in terms of the kind of negotiation that happens. Yeah, because I'm sure the negotiation would be slightly different because the width of the room is different. The relationship between the front door, the door which goes into the the kitchen area is different, differently positioned. Uh, and that is how I, I wonder that in both your studies, if you could look at it extremely carefully, would you be able to say something about how type affects or type limits or affords certain activities? Yeah. Uh, but I would again like to ask both of you, Prachi and Avantika, uh, in based on your understanding, do you think that the baker or the papad maker would have continued to do baking classes or papad making irrespective of the house that they lived in? They would have found a way to negotiate? Or do you think that there are some house types which make it more difficult and some plan types which will make it easier? Is a specific question I would like you to answer. Yeah. And coming to Akanksha, I just felt a bit of dissonance. I mean, on one hand, you were talking of DCR, then you are talking of climate responsiveness, and the third component was this whole flood, moisture, worms, mold, which is more of a durability aspect. Yeah. But also, I would like you to respond to in the conclusion when you were saying, where you make statements that in the old DCR, more open space was available at a project level, which you are claiming allows more water to percolate into the ground and therefore less possibility of flooding. Uh, I'm not too sure whether it would work like that. Uh, it would all depend on how the ground treatment of that project in which there is more open space is done, right? If I'm going to pave that area, it doesn't help. And so if at all I want to make any sort of conclusive statement of potential flooding of housing due to DCR, I wonder whether I should rather connect it to the topography of the city and how land parceling and the way roads are resurfaced is affecting flooding, or for that matter, when you made the argument that when the balcony spaces are more, uh, there is more light and ventilation, and therefore there are more light ventilation or cross ventilation possible, and therefore less chances of uh, uh, moisture related damage to buildings. Couldn't I argue exactly the other way around, that in fact in the previous DCR, the surface area of the building to the built up area or carpet area of the house was much more. So in fact, balconies are increasing surface area, and therefore chances of seepage are more than if there is no balcony. Uh, and in both cases, it is about the quality of construction rather than the presence or absence of balconies. But I did feel that in yours, to me, when I was looking at the drawings and these small photographs that you have put up, my sense is your study is more about very small changes to life that people are doing because they are living in particular apartments. It's, to me, the conclusion is not so much about how DCR or other things are affecting, but in a nuanced way how someone's house is flooding, and therefore they are finishing their walls differently, or this whole act of preparation that they are doing in anticipation of floods is very different versus some other house where there is seepage from a wall, so they are forced to deal with the house differently. So in that sense, if I had to tie it to the question of type, uh, maybe the argument you are making is that the plan type does not tell us the story at all, because you might have two houses with the same plan, type of plan, but if one house has its west wall completely drenched because of seepage, and on the ground floor that same house with the same type, plan type, has water seepage from the floor, the way life happens in those two apartments is drastically different, and the plan does not tell us the story. If you're putting it in that way, I think there is lot of insightful things you could be saying out of it.
Yeah, so to answer your question of if gender or age has something to do with how the house works overall, when in the initial days and after they have started practicing and it's been a while, so uh, there are also factors such as presence and absence of maybe the, in some cases the bread earner was solely the women, and in that case it didn't change much. But when it comes to a few other cases where they have husbands or they have in-laws, they need to, during the initial days they needed permissions ki, and the argument that they put forward was कि अगर घर संभालोगे then you can continue working, but the house is the main thing and that is what you have to handle. So but over time when they see that these women are doing good in their field or have a social recognition, then they also become supporters and then they start helping in their work in ways ki I'll do the packaging of it or I'll handle the finances of it, and then they start becoming the support members. So in the case of the papad making lady, she had, though the her husband was a vegetable seller, she had to first ask him कि मैं ये करूँ क्या, and then later when things got better, her husband after certain duration of the day started joining her in making these things and started helping her out. But when it comes to the garland making lady, she was the sole earner. So in that case, no one was there to, question her, or to even, no one was there कि जिसको उसको पूछना पड़े to start, and she had to do it because of monetary reasons. So that is there, and there was no difference in her story over the years.
Just a quick clarification. No, my question was if that papad lady was a papad man and everything else was the same,
Hmm.
where the papads were dried or how much of the living room was usurped for papad making, would it have changed? I completely
Yes.
understand that gender in that sense does play a role, like you're saying, because it was the woman, she had to ask permission. I'm asking that if it was the man in that place, would the papad making have occupied more of the living room or not?
I think she's debating about the way in which genders occupy certain domains in the house. Like the fact that how much can you spread? It's a very gendered thing. I think in one of the earlier symposiums also, student was exploring this aspect that how how a certain gender occupies domestic space, and the fact that you need permission to do something in the house itself speaks of a certain geography that a gender kind of occupies in the house.
Yeah. So, like, you use the word productivity, and productivity has a very violent history, both vis-a-vis age and gender. Because the two things that productivity does not like is somebody getting old. And so the dispensability is built into productivity. And the female body and the aged female body is the most dispensable body. So, and you have both of these terms in your title. Hmm. So, anyways, it's interesting, but it's a very violent history of socialism, capitalism, which is also made these categories settle.
But I wanted to annotate that also, that these women are from a social space when there was the second wave of feminism, where productivity or becoming productive was the way of becoming free. And I think that's why it holds a very different kind of meaning in their lives. And that's why for them, becoming economically productive was important to claim a certain kind of agency in living. I think that's the space that it's coming. So of course, like today it will be very different, um, um, because the discourse of feminism itself has gone way ahead.
So, when you think of a space, and uh, it it functional, like you think of space into a functional description, and it will get quickly optimized. Like at one level, and affordance becomes zero. So right now, the apartment has become so optimized, like there are no space, for the passageways, or the planters. So what are these then uh, non-optimized areas, which are getting hybridized, so like the passage, then the space between the kitchen. So while all space might have some level of hybridity, not all are designed to adapt i- intentionally, and dynamically, to have diverse activities, and support, like without disrupting the everyday life. So when you ask ki, what how type affords certain activities, so yeah.
So my argument is mainly on the everyday life. Like, how does so even though in the older buildings the houses were smaller, the houses were smaller, they were more malleable and more adaptable to the climatic condition or the weather related challenges that were happening. But similarly in the newer houses, even though they have maximized the built up area, the houses are much larger, but the problems are, even though they have resolved some of the problems that were happening earlier, but there are the adaptations that happen in those houses are fewer or very or limited to mainly interior or interior rather than spatial problems, spatial adaptations. So, yeah, because in the older buildings, for example, in the ground floor houses where the flood used to occur, so they started making those lofts where they could store their valuables and shift on the upper level so that it is not affected by the flood. But in the newer buildings, even though don't have any problems of flood, but there are problems of light and ventilation, even though their windows are south facing, but they still have problems of light and ventilation due to the neighboring buildings. But there's nothing they can do for that. There is no so yeah.
I understand that the topics are complex, but sometimes I feel that even in your when you're designing your research, if you sometimes ask the right kind of questions, like the question going on in my mind, for example, which I put down, no? So if I actually take all these homeowners and give them options of apartments roughly of the same size with the same number of bedrooms, I am wondering, will they say doesn't matter, koi bhi chalega, or will they look at some apartments and say हाँ हाँ ये मेरे लिए ये थोड़ा ज़्यादा अच्छा है, ये थोड़ा कम है, because that tells me how they are correlating all these aspects of doing different things in houses with the plan type or with the affordances that the plan is giving.
I think the thesis has been constructed not from the side of the buyer, but from the side of the designer. What I mean to say is, if you realize that these things are happening, could you remodel your type to accommodate certain more things?
But to me, in that case, the study would point out what are the issues or why the baking class or the papadwali is not able to do it that well because the house is not. Or if I look at it from other lens, I think it gets into the adaptability versus flexibility debate. All the housing proponents who talk of flexibility, they are talking of a tight fit between design and use. So they are saying that if we know that it's going to be used for home-based work, the architecture should change. And adaptability, people are arguing that no, human beings are an adaptable species. They'll figure it out, don't bother. And both are valid arguments to make. What is I could not gather from your studies, on which side do you fall? Do you believe that human beings are adaptable? कोई भी घर दे दो, कोई भी plan दे दो, कर देंगे. So why should architects bother about it? Or are you saying no, 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 there are small changes, थोड़ा door में बड़ा कर दूं, थोड़ा एक window यहाँ डाल दूं, तो it will become better. So we should carefully do that. Which do you believe?
Um, so I believe in the second part where we should be a bit sensitive towards designing certain spaces. When it comes to my study, the informal social networks that these women form um, are a very vital part in their business making क्योंकि जितना expand होगा it'll be better. So maybe designing a space that allows such social gatherings to happen or these networks to happen would be much better for them. But the inner spaces can be then adapted by them in depending on what kind of work they want to do. But the overall structure, the framework, as you say, can be thought of carefully.
Uh, I also agree with her. Ki, like we should, think more like as the, we think of more how we should optimize the, apartment, but the optimization only helps the logistic things and the calculation, but the living quality, affects like the softer things like the passageway, like how the people are, compromising कि like passage की ज़रूरत नहीं है तो फिर living room बढ़ा दो, passage थोड़ा कम कर दो. But that space gets used in, like in a certain way, like it also becomes a boundary, like between the bedroom and the living room. So like the bedroom is a private space for some, and the drawing class is in the happens in the living room. So if you optimize so much ki like passageway thoda kam kar de, that the private space and the living room become बहुत पास में, फिर it doesn't make sense कि like लिविंग रूम में मैंने क्लास ले लिया एंड फिर बेडरूम भी बाजू में ही है, तो फिर they have to shut the door for the whole time.
So even I agreed on the second part. So, so sometimes there is no need to make bigger changes or larger changes. These smaller changes also can make a bigger, larger difference. So in one of my houses where, like, since because of less space, they combined the bathroom and the toilet and made a designated space for the kitchen. So because of that, they got 3 separate designated rooms where they could spend their time. So that earlier the spaces were cramped. There were only 2 rooms. So that just by combining the toilet and the bathroom, it allowed for them for a more spaces, and also in that same space in one of the kitchens. So since earlier there was a bathroom, so the window over there is small and it faces the shaft. So the size of the window over there, maybe it allows for less light and ventilation. But if we change the size just by like thoda sa change kiya, so that can also make a bigger difference over there.
Also, you should look at the work of Prasad and Rupali. You've seen their work on the shop. नहीं देखा ना? So the reason I'm saying is that this design adaptations in the house, like if you have ever done house hunting in Bombay, oh my god, the kind of stuff I have seen in design innovation in the house is कुछ निकला तो बेड निकल आया, कुछ पलटा तो रैक निकल आया, वो खिड़की में छज्जा में साइकिल रखा है बच्चे का, like so and I'm telling you to look at their work on the shop. What is it called? That type, the 1 foot shop, because there is also space constraint, right? And there's so much multiple use. So in a pragmatic way, to just do a taxonomy of all the, actually your work has it, but to kind of list it as design hacks.
Yeah, I think that I think the question that is coming up is that what kind of knowledge affects policy which produces these spatial products? And once that is standardized, these become cookie cutter kind of deliveries. And so, can these stories impact the way in which they shape space? So, it's a very large kind of recursive arc, but I think at a certain kind of, in a certain way, they trouble the way in which we, or certain kinds of, knowledge informs the way we design spaces. We come to standards of design. You wanted to add something?
Yeah, just I wanted to add in the context of the type, the question of type. So I do feel that, and you mentioned briefly in the beginning, so most of the times when as architects we are talking of type, we are talking of ordering systems, as in we draw the plan type diagram as a parallel wall type or an axial type. Whereas the work of space syntax, so if I talk of organizational structure as type or access, if I look at type as access, I feel that in a lot of your cases, just drawing those J graphs, for example, of how houses are different because their J graphs are different. Because access type also in many of these cases affects the potentiality of the use of space. And similarly, the other type one could discuss here is the house as a programmatic type, because that is also being questioned. The idea of the home versus the office, these are programmatic types that as architects we we have, and your study is questioning that type. So in the context, I think the to me, fair enough, there is a value in looking at things from a type perspective, because then we can say that something is typical. To me, the value of type is that it allows us to quickly make sense of the world. Because I look at a cat, every cat is different, but I look at it and quickly say it's a cat. So I classify it without having to go through the whole process again and again. But that very thing which helps us when we think typically also results in the fear of stereotyping, which also emerges from the type. So just as much as archetype also emerges from the type, stereotype also emerges. So in that sense, I found it fascinating that your study is sitting at that intersection. It uses type as a method to study, but yet it wants to break stereotypes. But I feel that the organizational and programmatic stereotypes are as important as ordering stereotypes. So for ordering type, the plan is a good tool, but for organizational structure, I think it's the J graph. And for program, I don't know how you would like to put it across, how it breaks the programmatic types.
Maybe I can now open the panel to the audience if there are any comments, questions. Or
I like this panel very much because, um, I mean, there is actually there are usually more tuition walis than tuition walas, or I, I actually have never seen a papad wala. It's only papad wali, So I think there is that dimension is very strong. The gender dimension is very strong in the whole thing, and I think if we could recast it as a panel around apartments, no, the apartment life and apartment living, and the way it kind of life complicates the apartment form and type and space and the whole logics. I think that will be very interesting to kind of look at look at this panel, like how these people's enterprise and these people's energies kind of complicate the idea of the apartment, which was for a certain kind of life and living and way of doing things. So just that actually just inverse the whole thing, so then it kind of makes difference.
if there are no more comments, we can satisfy our hunger. Thank you. We'll meet at 2:30 with our final panel. Thank you.